gotta be strong in this time, son. I'm a survivor. I will survive, I will survive. And I'm a firm believer. We'll forever strive just to stay alive. That simple means it. Nobody can hold me, man. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can hold me sick. I will let alone negativity. Nobody can hold me, man. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can, nobody can. Everybody show me some strength. No weakness, show me a lion bomb. Strength, no weakness, show them who we are. Strength, no weakness, show me a lion bomb. Everybody strength, no weakness, show them who we are. Not when you roll. Your enemies, they must tremble. Your enemies, they must tremble. Yo, not when you roll. Everything has to humble. Everything has to humble. I'm a go-getter. I just go hard, I just go hard. And I'm a kind of fella. Put my trust in God, put my trust in God. That simple means say, nobody can hold me, man. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can turn me sick. I will let alone negativity. Nobody can hold me, man. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can, nobody can. Yo, just show me some strength. No weakness, show me a lion tongue. Strength, no weakness, show them who we are. Strength, no weakness, show me a lion tongue.
This is Ridealong Live, where everyone has a story to tell.
You gotta be firm in this time, son. You gotta be strong in this time, son. I'm a survivor. I will survive, I will survive. And I'm a firm believer. We'll forever strive just to stay alive. That simple means that nobody can hold me, man. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can turn me sick. I will let alone negativity. Nobody can hold me.
Welcome to the ride, welcome to the ride. I want everybody to sing it. Feel blessed. Sing it loud. Show me some strength. Strength, no weakness. Everybody come ahead, as you're coming, go ahead and share the program as I'm doing right now. Share it, start a watch party, put it on a page. It's Ride Along for today. It's Ride Along for today. As you're coming, go ahead and share up the thing, start a watch party, invite a friend, tag a page, tag a group, whatever you gotta do, guys. I'm doing that right now as well. Whatever you gotta do it right now. Because we're going right into the program. We ain't wasting no time. We ain't sticking, nothing like that. We're going straight into the program because today is a very lengthy and should be very educational discussion. One more share, and I'm yours. One more share. All right, I'm done. All right, today's a very informative and historical program. Over the weekend, Ridealong teamed up with the University of the West Indies Cable Campus on Mona to start a conversation on the Grenada Revolution. We spoke about two very prominent leaders, two very historic leaders from Grenada. We spoke about Sir Eric Matthew Gary and Maurice Bishop. Because of time constraint, we were not able to speak on the whole entire revolution. So we told our audience, you, that we will come back with a part 2. Now on that panel, we had folks from Mr. Chubin, Porgy Chubin. We had Livingston Nelson, and we also had Francis Urias Peters. That was over the weekend. Now today, we're going to reconvene this conversation. And we have a brand new panel. Right. Well, not a brand new panel. We bring back Mr. Livingston Nelson because he's like an encyclopedia in a man. He's like an encyclopedia in his head. And we really, really needed more insight from Livingston Nelson. But new on the panel today, we have two of my friends who no stranger to the program. We have Mr. Michael Batiste, and Mr. Michael Batiste, his resume runs very, very long. He was a farmer, opposition leader of the GOLP, former agriculture minister, parliamentary representative for St. Andrews Southwest, which has happened to be my area, Great Ladigue, Union, Richmond, Pleasant, that area over there. Former MP from there. My friend also decided to join us today. He is no stranger to the ride. He is Mr. Dennis Charles. Remember, he shared a story of just a few years ago where he was arrested and during the days of the Revo, he was shot during the days of the Revo, and he had a dramatic story to tell. He's back with us here today. And of course, the man that they say he's like an encyclopedia. This man has all the information in his brain right there. He is the founder of the Tivoli Drummers, an activist, an all-around good guy, Mr. Livingston Nelson. We'd like to welcome all of my friends on the panel right here, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Charles, and Mr. Batiste. Guys, welcome to the ride. But before we do or say anything else, I have to mention some of the people who are joining us. I can't forget to mention Lydia James. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lydia James. Angela, thank you so much. Tamika Rogers, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing, guys. And this is what I want you guys to do. If you never shared the program before, I want you to do it today. Let today be the first time. If you never shared it before, today is the day you want to share, because this is a historical value, a very, very historical value. Those type of things that you find in a museum somewhere. There's this information you find in a museum somewhere. And because we learn so much about other people's history, we never really learn about our history. We have to compile this historical value and get people who know, who are some of them who have first-hand knowledge as what happened, so that we could understand what happened during the time of that era, that some would say a dark era in our life. All right. So to start it off, let's go over to Mr. Michael Batiste. Let me do a quick introduction of himself. Mr. Batiste, sir, welcome to the ride. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, very well. And I want to thank you and all the listeners out there. I want to thank you for having me on the program. I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion. I know Brother Charles very well, and also Brother Livingston Nelson. I know that we will have some interesting discussion as we go along today.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I am no stranger to the Grenadian people. I'm former leader of the opposition, former parliamentary representative for St. Andrews Southwest, former minister of agriculture, and currently still a political activist.
All right. Dennis Charles, again, brief introduction of yourself, sir.
Yes, once again, thank you very much for the invite to be here to speak to the Grenadian people and to the world, explaining exactly what went on. And the two great leaders that we had, Sir Eric Machagiri and also Brother Maurice Bishop. So we would delve a little deeper, peel some layers of the onion, and reveal to the people exactly who they were and what they stood for.
Absolutely. And Mr. Livingston Nelson, before we speak, Livingston Nelson, the fan in your background is giving us a breeze. I just realized it, so you may need to cut it off. And he is, of course, the founder of the Tivoli Drummers. Mr. Livingston Nelson, welcome to the program, sir.
Well, thank you, Junior, for having me. I think I am honored to be in the company of those two men, Dennis Charles and Michael Batiste. Those two persons I have a lot of respect for. We have often met and chit-chat here and there. So I am also looking for some very interesting conversation from both of them. And hopefully we can getting some questions from general public and have a very interactive and interesting conversation. Thank you, Junior, for having me again. I am very flattered that I was called a second time. Maybe I did a good job the first time.
Obviously, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's start, right? Because I was having this conversation earlier today with Michael, and we was talking about the revolution in reference to 1979, and Michael said to me, boy, what was in 79 was not a revolution. To understand a revolution, you have to go further back. So my intention was to start with 1979 and talk about the revolution from then, but Mr. Batisto advised me that that wouldn't be prudent. So to start, let us start with 1951. Mr. Batiste, tell us about 1951, that particular time in our era, and let's talk about the leadership style and the young then Eric Matthew Gary. Well, we lost connection. He been in and out with connection there. So one of you guys could probably jump on it. I'm not sure if Dennis or Livingston would be able to, but let's talk about the
I'll
young
go.
Eric Matthew Gary. I think. Hold on. I think he's coming back in. I think he's coming back in. All right. So Dennis, go right ahead. Let's talk about the young Eric Matthew Gary and 1951 revolution.
Yes, well, of course, coming back from Aruba, um, after World War II, as you know, the whole Europe was devastated by conflict, World War II, with the problem with Hitler and all of that. So after that time, there was no appetite for colonialism, as it were. You had many African countries agitating for change, for independence, liberation, and also it spread to the Caribbean. Remember that Haiti already had went ahead and defeated Toussaint a long time before. So that fever spread throughout the Caribbean, and you had a lot of revolutionary, or if you want to use the word, nationalistic leaders coming to the core. Many islands, including Trinidad with Butler and so forth. In Barbados, you had Boroughs and so forth. People who wanted nationhood and betterment for their people. So Eric Matthew Gary at the time, he was in Aruba making trouble. He was branded a troublemaker with his union activism and collective bargaining, message to the Grenadian workers there in the diaspora. The Dutch people at the time, they had about enough with him, and he was kicked out from Aruba. Upon reaching the island of Grenada, there was unrest in Grenada too, with the estate workers getting meager wages, not being paid, abused, very long hours, no medical benefit, no safety net in old age to depend on. And they were abused. In most cases, they were not properly educated, and the children had to follow in the footsteps with no room for upward mobility. So that was pretty much the scene that Gary went into. And being charismatic, he was self-read, self-taught. He rose very fast to the forefront, to the top of this movement, and demanded change from what we would call the plantocracy. Usually, the estates were owned and operated by folks with soft hair, straight nose, and light skin. So remember, it was a kind of half mulatto or mulatto kind of mix that we had. The Ramdanese, you look at people like that, the Nayaks. Throughout the country, you hardly had any estate, the Gales. You hardly had any estate with folks with nappy hair like me and dark complexion and flat nose. So that is the Grenada Eric Matthew Gary returned to. So the people, they were agitating for change. They wanted decent pay.
What was the political structure then in Grenada? Because we have to understand also that we were ruled then by England. So of course,
Yes.
I'm not expecting that we had a government, a parliament, a cabinet. It was nothing like that. So what was the structure set up for the government that represented the people of Grenada?
Grenada was a crown colony. So Britain at the time was in control of Grenada. There were people like Governor Green and all of that running the show. So really, the way the Grenadian economy operated, it was operated for the benefit of those who own plantations, their business interests. Great Britain looked out for the business interests of their people. So they had plantations, sugar plantations, all over the place from Boucherjou to River and Crane Estate and all of that. And that is what it was. So they didn't care about human rights or lack of rights or lack of economic opportunities for the poor working class. That was not the concern. Their concern was dollars and cents, profits.
Right. Okay. Michael, you're back here now, so I want to take full advantage of the fact that you're getting good internet for the moment. I want you to tell us about the person of Eric Matthew Gary back in 51 and the revolution of 51, Gary Revolution of 51, so we could kind of better understand 1979.
All right. Well, first, let me start off by saying that Grenada have only experienced one revolution, and that was in 1951. And when I say one revolution, because it was the masses revolt, Uncle Gary came in, he heard the cry of a people suffering from social and economic justice. He invited himself into the feelings and he started. His revolution was not about taking political power. His revolution was about solving the social and economic injustice that was happening on the island at the time. And he was successful in doing so. As you would recall, our people were virtually enslaved. People were working for meager wages. We had a sort of apartheid system in Grenada. Black people could not work in banks or so. So his first task was to solve the problem of injustice, social and economic justice. He got the workers together and, of course, mobilized them, formed what he called was the GMMIWU, and he organized the first workers' revolution that took place in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, some may say that his revolution was in a way to put the little man against the society, the people in the society. But it was far from that. It was, Grenada had a history of oppression, whereby people work on farms, they could not own lands, they got no benefits at all whatsoever. And he saw the need to bring about some justice to the working class and to the society. Prior to 1951, there was many people that were working on the estates. The estates would give them a little house spot, and as soon as they would clear it, in the next season they would ask them to move the house again. So it was turbulent times in during that 51 era when Sir Eric Gary came in. And,
was Eric Gary a political minded person? Was he like a demagogue? What was his
trade unionism and political activism go hand in hand. You cannot separate them. But initially, he did not enter the Grenadian scene as a political person. He came in as a union leader and he fought on behalf of the working class. And his revolution, as I said, and the only revolution we experienced in Grenada, was not about overthrowing a government, because at the time we were a colony, and of course we could not fight with the might of the British Army. But what he was successful in doing is getting the bourgeoisie and the plantocrats to recognize the injustice that was taking place and get them to come to the bargaining table so that the working class can have better wages. I think that was his entrance into the Grenadian life. It was not until 1955 when he formed, at the urging of the workers, he formed the Grenada United Party and entered into what they call at the time the legislative council elections, and his party was successful in gaining the most seats on the legislative council. It was from
Right.
there that he propelled himself as a national leader. You know, at the time you had the likes of Marichaux and the others were in that council as well. But his natural skills enabled him to propel himself as a national figure.
Right.
And in 1956, so he was in control of that legislative council.
Right. So we had 50, 50, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54 around that time there. Were Gary a liked individual? Did people gravitate to him because of his passion, his charisma, his articulation? First, was he a liked person, and what was he liked or disliked for?
He's still like today. He's the most loved, and I would say the politician that people adored the most in Grenada. I don't ever believe that we will ever see anyone coming close to that. I mean, Maurice Bishop had his followers, he had his love and his support among the people, but in terms of genuine love for a leader, that attribute could only goes towards Uncle Gary. Uncle Gary did not need security to go around the country. People protect him. He slept in people's homes. He interact with the people. The people saw him as truly one of their own, and therefore whatever he did, as far as they're concerned, they saw him as the next coming of Christ.
Wow. All right. So we had 50. We could bring back Dennis back in. And of course, we have the encyclopedia man, Livingston Nelson, there. We're saving him for a very special era. Bring him in. So we're at 50, 60. Let's move slowly into Eric Matthew Gary, seeing the need to get Grenada independent. What was the push like? What did he have to do to reassure the people? And who are some of the people who were, in pushing that agenda? And also, who are the people that was apprehensive about Grenada becoming an independent nation? And how did it all happen?
Yes, well, that's a very interesting question because, as I've said before, Gary's main emphasis was on bottoms-up growth. Building up the poor or the working class or the laborers, hence the word, the Grenada United Labour Party. It was never about assuming political power. Gary wasn't necessarily interested in politics when he came. When Gary was in Aruba, I told you, Gary was kicked out for trade unionism. He was branded a troublemaker. They didn't want him there no more, stirring up trouble, demanding wages and all of that. So anyhow, when he came back, and as time progressed, he did join the discontent with the workers for the kind of abuse they suffered at the hands of the estate owners or the plantocracy. And there was always a color issue there, right? Remember, if you look at all the big estates, the people who had horses and all of that, just look at them. I don't need to go there. Okay? At that time, a black person couldn't be, in front of any big business like bank manager, headmaster, and all of that stuff like that. They were looked down upon. In fact, they had to call a lighter person mom, or they had to put their head down and don't make eye contact and all of that. We're not in South Africa. So Gary was a radical. I mean, I want, he was a radical. And he brought his forces to bear. Number one, being very charismatic. He liked to dance. My dad used to be in parties with him all the time. I played cricket with the pans. My dad came from Aruba with. They used to call them flannel pans. That's why you see me dressing with that white, all the time. Right? Anyhow, so Gary was a people's person. Okay? He did gravitate into politics after because they are intertwined, as Michael Batiste rightly said. But initially, he was not an opportunist looking for political power.
Well,
so, yes.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Right. So I must lay that groundwork right there. He was truly into improving the lives of the working poor. So he started what you would call the Grenada Manual and Mental Workers Union, right? Union, not a political party. The political party came in afterward, as Michael said, around 55, 56, right? And it was called the Grenada United Labor. We go back to labor again. Gary was about labor, right? The poor, the laborers. And at that time, the laborers were being abused by the people up there, the plantocrats. Okay, so we saw the setting of the stage for a sort of, I don't know if you want to call it, some kind of warfare, because push would come to shove, and push did come to shove, where Gary had to bring forces to bear and bring the estates down on their knees, and they had to bow. He got them to make compromises. If you work on sugar plantation, he got the estates because they strike, and if they still didn't want to consent or give in, the estates were burnt. Gary was no joke. It wasn't a joke. It was a revolution.
Right.
Hence the coining of the phrase sky red. His flames, they were burned down. So they had to give in. All of them had to give in and come to Uncle Gary, which they used to call the little black boy from, Pearl's, that area up there, the little black boy, flat nose. Okay, they hated him. So he got, for sugarcane and those hard work, you get a 50% increase in pay or in wage. And also for banana and so forth, you get 25% increase. That was monumental, right? He brought his activity to Belmont Estate too. He crippled in, So Gary was not playing around. He was a people's person. The man was genuine. The man was real. And later on, I'd go on to talk about some of the things he did in terms of education. You know, the amount of schools that Gary built, over 30 schools, clinics all over the country. He wanted a clinic in almost every parish, and if not every village, and a lot of other things that he championed. The self-help. All of us coming together to help build and better the lives of others. The question raised by Michael Batiste about the estate owners making you move your house on a truck. Back in those days, we had those big board or wooden trucks, right? Where every minute you see the estate kick out somebody, or they kick out somebody, they had to break the house down, put the whole roof and all of that, and try to beg somebody for a spot. That person, before they give them the spot, would make them do all sort of work and don't pay them, and it was just abuse all over the place. That is what led to the land reform program, which we call Land for the Landless. I understand it helped bring down agriculture in terms of the way it was administered, but the theme behind it, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad concept, because those people were being abused and kicked out from the house spot.
I have a section that I'll talk. We'll go into the programs that was set up, initiated under Gary. But I want to talk about independence and going in for independence and the push to get Grenada independent. Michael, if you could just talk to us about that very fact of Grenada becoming independent, and what did Gary have to do in order to negotiate to get Grenada independent in 1974?
All right.
Michael, I realized you're in twice, so go ahead.
Hold one sec.
Twice. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm trying to work on the laptop so I can have
Okay, so let me take you out from one of these devices, and then so you won't be in twice. So stand by. Right, I'm gonna pull you in on this device here. Okay, Michael. So go right ahead, Michael. Talk to us about going in, Grenada becoming independent in 1974, and what did Gary have to do in order to get Grenada independent?
I think it was.
Yeah.
And the GNP at the time proposed what they said was a unitary state with Trinidad and Tobago. In other words, they wanted Trinidad to accept Grenada in a sort of unitary state. They campaigned on that, and of course they won the elections. That didn't go through. So Eric Gary came back into power a few years later, and immediately he went to the Home Office in England and petitioned the British government to allow Grenada's independence. The British government told him at the time that, look, go back to your people, seek a mandate, and come back to us. Are we there?
Yeah, we here.
Yeah. Okay. He went back to Grenada. He put it before the people in terms of a referendum, and he got the majority. He got a mandate. The results was 13-2. I think Dr. Friday was successful for the GNP and Robert Blaise in Carriacou.
Mm-hmm.
He then led a team back to Marlborough House to prepare Grenada's constitution for independence.
Who was that team? Who made up that team?
Well, the team was the lawyer Helliger, Derek Knights on one side. I think on the opposition side was Ben Jones, Robert Blaise, I think Hudson CPO, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Bernard Code was either an advisor or part of that delegation. I stand corrected in that.
Okay.
But they went to Marlborough House and they started the constitutional talks. And of course, the British government agreed that Grenada would be given independence.
Why the Constitution? Why the Constitution that we have right now? Because there are certain things in the Constitution, especially as it relates to the name Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, that has been placed on the referendum to have that change. That didn't go through. Why wasn't Carriacou and Petite Martinique initially added onto the name of Grenada in that Constitution?
It's because of political deception by what is now the New National Party, which was then the GNP. Now, in 1972, when they were discussing the constitutional arrangements at Marlborough House, the then opposition leader was Robert Blaise, the member of Parliament for Carriacou and Petite Martinique. He left that conference early. When it was agreed, when the British government agreed that Grenada will be given independence, Robert Blaise, Ben Jones, Hudson CPO, they left that conference early. And they returned to Grenada telling the Grenadian people that they didn't get independence. Uncle Gary and his delegation stayed behind. And in the final draft, as a payback for Robert Blaise for leaving that conference, the name Carriacou and Petite Martinique was omitted from the final draft, and hence the reason why the name Carriacou and Petite Martinique was never really is not on our passport, or is not the official name of Grenada. In the final draft, it said the name shall be called Grenada, rather than Grenada, Carriacou and Petite Martinique, as was originally agreed when the delegation, which included the opposition, was sitting at the table. It was Robert Blaise, GNP and NP team that left the conference prematurely and came back to Grenada and misled the Grenadian people that they were not getting independence. So you can see from Grenada infancy stage, there was perceptions and lies being told to the Grenadian people. The opposition never wanted Grenada to get independence. They had a national strike and we could talk about that because it, as a result of the national strike, hence the reason why Grenada have the highest port charges in the world today. The port was on strike, the telephone was on strike, electricity went on strike. The Union Jack was lowered with a flashlight. The Grenadian flag, which they so proudly waving today, was hoisted under Masanto. There was a time when only we, the Garryites, would recognize that flag and, of course, celebrate independence. During the Uncle Gary period, from 1974 up to 1979, it's a selected few of the population. It was supporters of the Grenada United Labour Party that embraced that Grenadian flag. I remember carrying that flag here in New York City and how I was jeered at. By people that were calling me all derogatory names only because my only sin at the time was hoisting that proud colors of the Grenadian flag.
So the Constitution, what you're saying, the Constitution wasn't a document that was just handed down. It was chiseled by
it was negotiated. And let me tell you something on that. In the Constitution, it said Commonwealth citizens can be members of Parliament. And that was put in the Constitution to satisfy the gentleman by the name of George Hostin. George Hostin was a Canadian citizen residing in Canada. Uncle Gary wanted him to be Minister of Finance and to run in the St. Andrews Northwest constituency where he ran against Dr. Mitchell and won. So as a result of that, that was inserted into the Constitution. Look, if you look at Grenada Constitution in relation to other constitution, we have one of the best constitution in Grenada. When the overthrow came about and Bishop recognized what was needed to change that constitution, he left that and introduced what he called the People's Law, and he bypassed that constitution. Grenada Constitution is the only constitution in the region where trade unions sit on the Public Service Commission. It is the only constitution, though they propagandize Eric Gary's name, saying he was this great dictator, it is the only constitution in the region where only the people could change that. Bishop came, he could not change it, because why? He needed a 2/3 majority. The first NNP came, the first government came under, the first NDC came in, no, first NNP came in under Howard Blaise. They had constitutional reform. They tried, it didn't successful. This government, even with a 2/3, even with 215 elections back to back, they still cannot change that constitution. So you see, my point in saying that Bishop regime was very effective in propaganda because they propagandized that Eric Gary was a dictator. How could a man be a dictator when he gave you a constitution that he himself could not just go in Parliament at his whims and fancy and change? In order for that constitution to change, you have to go to the people and get a 2/3 majority from the people in order to change the constitution. So Eric Gary was one of the most democratic leaders we had ever governing Grenada and the region. And that's factual by the fact that we have a constitution that so many of them today are struggling to change that constitution and they can't. And it's not, if Eric Gary was a dictator, as the others was, he would have put something in place that if he had a good night's sleep, he could go next morning in Parliament and say, bam, that changed. Under the People's Law, which was introduced by Maurice Bishop, your civil liberties were curtailed. People were arrested and put in prison without a trial or charge, not knowing what the offenses was. We had over 3,000 people in prison. And why? Because we did not have a working constitution. There was not one single political prisoner under the late, great Eric Gary. That's not to say there were not excesses, of course, and we will get to that, and I'm sure others would agree that there was excesses in terms of his supporters in both in what they so famously stage as the Mongoose Gang. And the Mongoose Gang was just really a part of the Ministry of Health, working on the vector control.
Michael, we go get to the Mongoose gang. We go get to the Mongoose gang, and I'm very, 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 very sure. But I want to bring in Livingston Nelson, who he is. Yeah, fine. Yeah, Nelson. So
Yes.
we had you on in the back in the green seat for a little while, but this is where I want you to chime in here. The person of Eric Matthew Gary. What tell me about this man from your historical recollection. What type of person was he? What type of person was he as a leader? And what was a personal feeling that the people in Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martin had about Eric Matthew Gary?
Junior, let me move into that quickly or briefly because I realize we probably would not get to October 19th or 25th if we stay, because we can speak a whole week on Eric Gary himself. Well, of course, it was known that he was in Aruba, and then he came back around 1949. He was from Dunfermline area, the place where his parents' house is still standing. There are some walls there showing the exact location where his parents, where they were living. But if I give you a background before I really talk about the man, how people were living in that time, most persons were living in wattle houses. The roof of those houses were in what some people call kakabe. For some time it was with bamboo, and the bamboo was one lying down and the other one in order to prevent to get the water out. Some of them they use cane straw for the roofing, or sometimes coconut straw, and they mix that with cow dung in order to get perfect roofing. Some of the houses, the frame itself was made with bamboo, or sometimes they use wattle. People went to work, and people went to work barefooted. So that was the kind of condition. There was very little electricity, very little running water. That was the rural Grenada and most of Grenada during that time. Even in the town of St. George, that is how people were living. The condition on the estate where most persons work, right? Most persons work. The condition was such that you go to work, and it was mainly nutmeg and cocoa. Banana came in after 1955. So the nutmeg and cocoa, when there was cocoa to pick, people work until the owner was satisfied. It was not like 8 hours or 7 hours. So people had to go and complete the task sometime with mass and toe. So Gary came and he made that condition. But coming out of Aruba, where he was involved with, he was a supervisor in one of the oil refinery, he left there stating that he's coming to change Grenada. And on his return, he immediately went to the estate and mobilized and spoke to the workers. And he was telling the workers that the condition they were working on was totally deplorable, and they need to organize, or he would help them to organize in order to get things done. Apart from the long hours, the distance carrying. Now, let me just say, in terms of working on the estate, people had to carry, there are two main things: carrying the output, the products. So in case of cocoa or nutmeg, you carry it out and you bring it to the closest point. Some of the estate had carts. Some of the carts were ox-driven, some was donkey, but most of them were ox-driven. A few independent farmers had donkeys. So they would carry to the closest point, and then that would carry to the estate. So for example, a woman working on the estate was getting 40 cents. A man was getting 50 cents a day. They were carrying baskets. So a basket, when they had to fertilize the land, they used two things: mainly cow dung or seaweed. And you had to carry, for a day work, it was 120 baskets per day. And that was what people used. That was your labor. Some people want to work as early as 11 years, because in terms of education, not many persons get education. So let me skip some of the detail and go directly. So Gary came, and as he started mobilizing, he did several things. One, he challenged the colonial government. Now, earlier on, some of the other speakers, both Michael Baptiste and Dennis Charles, alluded to that. When you were brown skin, you were unable to work. For matter of fact, if I was to go back, I would say that since slavery, black people work and there was no compensation. When the Indians came as indentured, part of the settlement was to be given 5 acres of land. Later on, the religion that, and some of even the Indian persons didn't get that, but most of them inherited land. Hence, you see that some of the estate owners later on became, by the 1940s, 1950s, they were of Indian descent, and mainly that is why they were the one that inherited the estate. So Gary came, and that was the condition. So he had to fight against the colonial government to see if he can get us right. He fought for trade union rights, as Michael Baptiste and Dennis alluded to. He fought against racial prejudice, and he moved the daily wages from 50 cents for men to 80 cents, while it was still a colonial government, 40 cents to 70 cents for women. He revitalized the agricultural industry immediately after Janet that destroyed the nutmeg and, well, mainly the nutmeg and some of the cocoa. Now, cocoa was a lot more resilient, but a lot of the nutmeg tree fell. And Gary had, while he was there, a lot of the extension of his like the Hannibal and the Noel, etc., those guys physically went into the estate to work along with farmers and help to revitalize the agricultural industry. Now, we are looking at that because you would see, in terms of response from other governments after Ivan and after in COVID, that.
All right, we lost Livingston Nelson there. Hopefully, we get reconnected back with him. Let's go back to you, Mr. Baptiste. Someone posted something there, and I guess he was referring to a little later in the history where he spoke about Gary losing. I think it was Mo. Gary losing his popularity, going down into like the later part because of the widespread corruption. Could you speak to that? Gary losing his popularity and the love from the people.
Not based on corruption. Not based on corruption, because he cannot identify any areas of corruption. That was a law-abiding government. There was a time when the government was dissolved for, they say, what was Squandermania. And what was this Squandermania? Because he bought a piano for his home for $1,300. And the administrator at the time felt it was insensitive of him to have a better piano, he as a black man, than a white man. So the British government got together and they dissolved. Now, in terms of losing popularity, that is a norm with politicians and governments. From time to time, you lose popularity. And we will get to that because, as a matter of fact, in 1976, there was an election. And while in 72, he had 13-2, 76, it came down to 9-6. So obviously, he was losing popularity. The opposition was gaining grounds, and elections were held in a democratic manner. The results was well accepted by all. So we will get to that later on, see that there were no genuine reason for a violent overthrow because we had a democratic system that was functioning well. He was losing popularity. The opposition was 9-6. They had another charismatic leader, Maurice Bishop, at the helm. And therefore, the foundation was laid for a democratic Westminster-style transfer of power. If he had election was in 76, overthrow in 79. So I would not disagree with the caller that he was losing popularity like everybody else. He lost elections before. He won elections before. Just like any leader wherever in the world, you lose some and you win some time.
Right.
But in terms of the corruption,
yeah.
In terms of corruption, let me just add. In terms of the corruption, that was a part of the PRG propaganda because they seized all Sir Gary's property. And when he returned to Grenada, he was able to show the authorities how he bought the properties and how he paid for it. And the court ruled that all his properties must be returned, and not only returned, but returned with huge compensation. So the corruption part was unfounded. And if I say you're losing popularity, I say yes, but not corruption.
All right, Dennis, were there widespread corruption during the time that led to Matthew Gary losing popularity?
No, that's not correct. What there was widespread propaganda. And remember that the mistake Gary made, right? One of the biggest mistakes was that he held on to the people he met the time he landed in Grenada. So if folks working on the estate were like 25, 30, whatever, years old and so forth, he did not increase his base. You know what I'm saying? He did not appeal to those who at that time were 10 years old, 15 years old, and so forth, coming up. So by the time they reach 18, 19, 20 years old, they would continue and vote for him. In other words, he stayed with who he had and he did not expand his base. That was the biggest mistake. And if I could add also, as far as having an effective minister of information to correct some of the perceptions out there, because perception sometimes is reality. So if somebody invent a good lie on you and you did not counteract that lie, you just leave it, let it simmer there, let it stew, okay, it's going to become effective against you because you did not take the time to dispel and this, so that is what Gary did. He made some huge mistakes when they came up with all sorts of obia. He worked in obia and he doing all kind of stuff. Like
was all of that a myth? Was not a myth, but was all of that propaganda that he could not hit back fast enough, so he just spread and he just continued to fester, and now we see it historically as truth? Was that all a lie?
Yeah, well, so what happened? They realized Gary was not punching back. He continued being charismatic. He was popular. Remember, around Christmas time, he would have all the estate owners, workers, the poor people. They dress in a nice little dandan and they went down Mount Coral to eat and drink and mingle with Uncle Gary. Sometimes they bring their children, they get toys, they get gifts for Christmas. We play with toys around Christmas time and all of that. They went back home with all of that stuff and the kids were happy. So he held on to his base. He did not go out of his way. He did not realize or recognize at the time how effective lies could be.
Right.
And mind you, lies travel faster than the speed of light.
Yeah, we know that. We know that even in this very informative and information age. Livingston, I want to come to you, right? Because right.
Yeah.
Listen, we got cut off earlier, but I want you to pick back up from there, but also give us some insight in this, right? Michael Batiste just said that Eric Machugeri, he was a charismatic leader, right? And loved by the people. There was no widespread corruption. Then what made the uprising then of Maurice Bishop to cause the overthrow or the coup d'etat in 1979 then?
Let me quickly go through a list of what I call Gary's goodwill. I was just mentioning women with boots. Women for the first time on the estate were given boots and pants to wear. Working hours were cut to from 12, 13 hours to 8 hours. Workers carried a lot shorter distances. In 1962, Gary had lost, and he had lost mainly because the GNP was campaigning on a promise of having a unitary state. By 68, Gary came back on the scene and he acquired a few more wealth, because at that time, 62, between that time, he was accused then of being a proper poor. The middle class, in a sense, shunned him a lot. So he came back, and I believe from that time he came back with a set of vengeance. So in 1968, the Land Acquisition Act was passed, where 30 odd estates were acquired. The Providence Fund was introduced. Back pay for workers for the first time became a reality in Grenada. Gary had a lot to boast about. Between 1968 and 1972, we had Expo 69, lady governor. A lady became our governor, Miss World, Jennifer Hussein. Gary introduced the National Zoo, agricultural scholarship for Guyana, but also a lot of scholarship, secondary schools, a Grossmith Commission increase government pay by 70% to government workers. Nursing aid and nursing assistant was introduced for the first time, etc., etc. The list can go on. I don't want to labor on that too much, but Gary had a lot of goodwill going to it. And there came now in 1969 a group of young men that formed Mark then started challenging, because they had a new ideology of governance. They started challenging Gary. By 72, you had the Jewel in St. David. And those two groups later on came together. That level of opposition, I believe, when Gary felt that, listen, man, I am doing so much for this country and I am being challenged. Gary then Michael Battis alluded to it. He started having a group of persons that had seen him as a local or as a ground guard. With all that they have gotten, some local persons felt that if you challenge Gary, you challenge me. They took opposition to Gary personal. So the persons that were quite, I would say, maybe illiterate, some of them had nothing to do. Gary got to work for them in called the Mongols Eradication Gang, I think, or squad or gang, one of the way. Now those guys and then develop a personal loyalty to Gary. So anywhere he went, they were his ex officio bodyguard. And when persons on their own decide to do this or decide to do that, Gary reacted. So in 72, 73, with this level of opposition, several unrest took place. The NJM that time had been coming up themselves with the joining with Teddy Victor, Unison White Man, Sambas, etc. Things started happening. But we found that a lot of checks, there was not a lot of checks and balance in the system. Meaning persons that were loyal to Gary would commit a series of crimes. They would meet guys on the street, they would slap them, they would box them, they would meet them in the night, and they would be having axe angle and battles. Those guys got busted. For a matter of fact, in Grenville on, I think it was the 18th of, stand corrected, November 1973, when the NJM had a meeting carried for Grenville, a group of, this time police, together with Mongols gang, they were supposed to have that meeting in the cinema. This side they can have no meeting in the cinema. Those guys and them around, they end up by HM Bola, or what we call Top Bola. They were hiding by Bola. The police came and they said you got to open up. Bola said we're not going to open up. They give him count 1, 2, 3, and if we don't open up, we're gonna blow down the bait, we're gonna blow down the door, we're gonna break down the door. Eventually, some men, Bola opened up the door. 6 men were in prison. At the end of the night, they were in prison. All of them bloodied, who got stitches, Kendrick Radix, etc. Get several stitches. It was alluded that some of them head was shaven with broken bottles. And they all slept in the same cell with the underwear. So when Dr. Gibbs came and Rupert Bishop, the father of Maurice Bishop, came, and other lawyers came, the police at the police station said, we have some guys there, but you cannot see them now. We are going to bring them tomorrow at the magistrate where they might get bail. So those guys and them slept like that. Now that led to a series of other activities. But by and large, I think what happened, I think with that goodwill that Gary had, he started losing it because the challenge to his leadership with guys that was quite intelligent, articulate, and became quite charismatic. They started attracting a whole number of young people. And the work of the GVC, the Mongols gang, the secret police, they exacerbate that kind of attention. Meaning the abuse that they meted out to persons was such that people started getting more attention and becoming more attached to the NJM. And that is how that started happening. In January, you have the group, after that whole fiasco, you have this whole group of persons that went down into St. George's, and with the group of 22, the committee of 22, the nurses, other trade unions, you had the private commerce, a series of different groups came, the churches came together and they had a massive demonstration. And in that massive demonstration, Gary, they had a one on the Saturday that was so huge that Gary called out on the radio on Sunday and he said, I am calling all able men and women, and I want the toughest and the roughest roughneck to come to my rescue. And so those guys and them assembled at Government House, and at a demonstration, they said accidentally or coincidentally, one of them soft drink truck was packed, and in that fiasco during the demonstration, bottles started pelting. People get bottles thing, and Rupert Bishop got shot. So you're looking at 74 now in January. And so now leading into independence, what you find really happening that independence had this sort of lockdown, the electricity company, a lot of the people in the public service showed that demonstration against Gary. And so we got independence. There was one car light that was shining the hoisting of this flag. Yeah? Because there was no electricity on the island, and we got independence under that condition. And that is because of the opposition to Gary. So I think, in a sense, you had a series of different activities that led to that. But let me just say, which up to 1976, yet still, Junior, and I want to say that because irrespective of what was taking place in Grenada, in the 1976 election, right, the opposition, they came together to form the alliance. Now, the alliance had the GNP, the UPP, and the NJM. The NJM got 3 seats. The GNP got 2, that is with Norris Bain and Robert Blaze, and the UPP with Winston White. And then you had the NJM with Unison Whiteman, Bernard Code, and Maurice Bishop. So out of the 9, out of the 15 seats, they got 6 seats. But what one should be very mindful of, that out of that whole, the alliance got 49% of the vote. So Gary only won with 51%. So that was the state of Grenada going into 76. And that situation just continued developing further on, leading into March 13th.
All right, guys, you're watching. I see you there, Dennis. Guys, you're watching Ride Along Live. This is going to be at least a 2-hour discussion right here on the events leading up to the revolution. And as Michael would say, it wasn't a revolution, it was a coup d'etat in 79. We're talking about that. We're also going to go into what they call Thanksgiving in Grenada, and if it really was Thanksgiving. So we have a lot to discuss, guys. Stay with us, and we urge you right now to share the program, share it. If you shared it before, share it again. Dennis, I saw you had something to insert into that piece of historical data.
Yes, I fully agree with my dear friend and colleague Livingston Nelson. But for context, I must jump in and slightly take a different segue in what he had said. We must factor in the reaction of the plantocrats against Gary. They never forgave Gary for what he did, in the 50s. Or early 60s. They never supported Gary. They always tried to undermine and sabotage everything that Gary did. And I could name a lot. They never agreed to the School of Medicine, which accounts for more than 30-35% of Grenada's GDP. They opposed Expo 69. I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm just showing you that, yes, there were times when Gary overplayed his hand. But you must factor in the stiff opposition that those who felt they have to pay back Gary for what he did to them by increasing workers' wages and so on and so forth. They undermined him at every turn, right? Mm-hmm. And before I forget, let me tell you, I'll reveal that now. It's in my book. But I'll tell you, there was a guy called Zagada. I don't know where he came from. I think somewhere on the western side. He had one tooth missing. He was a kind of half Indian guy. Like when I was a little kid, when I was in detention up at Richmond Hill. And I used to be around a lot of people. And he was talking about how he used to burn down some of the buildings in St. George's by soaking rope in gasoline and stretching it all the way back up and lighting it like a wick and then he run, and it would slowly get inside to the treasury or wherever it is he had to burn down. You understand? I'm talking about sabotage. So you have to factor that we had some wicked players trying to bring down the government of Gary. Also, the principal of McDonald College at the time, my brother was going to school in McDonald College, right? Well, in Sotens, you had a whole lot of GNP, the Japals, and all of them, the Fridays, all those people up there, Alexis, all of that, they were opposed to Gary. They used school children. So bringing all these people in St. George's was not to hold a peaceful demonstration just to demonstrate and voice your opinion. No, it was to shut down the government and bring down Gary using the economics, by economic means, to close down the port, shut down electricity, bring the country on it to its knees to force Gary out without using a gun.
Yeah,
that was the first attempt.
But Junior.
Yeah, go ahead.
Junior.
Quickly,
Yeah, what Dennis said, alluded to. Now, in 1970, there was a Black Power movement that really took that rose. There was a rise up in Trinidad. And one of the statements made by Gary that when your neighbor house is on fire, you got to alter yours. Yeah. So what you find happening, and I alluded to that earlier on, that there was the plantocracy quite entrenched. And
exactly.
Gary not only was that, Gary was this black boy, one, that didn't have the color of the upper class. Secondly, Gary was this guy from the countryside. Yeah. So he was two things that was actually going against him. So yes, the plantocracy never supported the GNP in particular, made up mainly of those persons, never supported Gary. I also firmly believe that when those guys and them came from, the universities in 69 and 70, they also believed that they were the bright kids on the block and they had entitlement because they were brighter than, and they had a new philosophy, a new theory of governance that they wanted to experiment in Greenland. And irrespective of what his agenda and what he was doing, those guys and them couldn't see it. So yes, the plantocracy. So when in the Land Acquisition Act, what Gary did was to try to break the back of the plantocracy and to energize his base by giving lands to a lot of the persons that were poor, and those persons basically eventually came to support him, or some of them already were supporting him. So you had the Land for the Landless program being initiated by that. I mean, I think you cannot take it irrespective of what happened later on. Gary was probably one of our foremost visionary with a homegrown program, not one that was instilled, not one that was kidnapped from overseas and imposed on us. It was a homegrown program and trying ways in which he trying to think. So yes, the opposition came, and the opposition came for several reasons. But mind you, when they actually opposed, some of the reaction was such that it helped radicalize and consolidate some of the other youths that did not understand some of the progress and some of the goods that Gary delivered to the Grenadian society.
We're talking about goods and we're talking about all this stuff here. But in that latter part there, we hear so much about the Mongoose Gang and how the Mongoose Gang was beating up people and taking advantage of situation. Michael, speak about the Mongoose Gang. And if we're talking so highly about what Gary have done, what about the Mongoose Gang, which some would say was under his orders to beat up, bloody up people's face and beat up people? Talk about that, Michael.
Let me go back to what Brother Nelson said about the Land Acquisition Act. The Land Acquisition Act, Brother Nelson, was not necessarily to get back at the plantocrats. There was social, economic injustice taking place in Grenada. There were thousands of people that did not own a piece of land, could not find a piece of land to call their own, to put a little shingle over their heads. Now, as we said earlier, Massa owned all the lands. We don't know how he owned the lands. And if you're talking about injustice, you have to go back to the British government, because there was a time when people owned lands that they had no papers for. When the British government recognized what was happening, they introduced what they call administration, whereby they allowed those who had lands to do the necessary paperwork to give them ownership to these lands. The natives were not entitled to such privilege. Now, speaking about the Mongoose gang, first let us understand, during the early 60s and the early 70s, the world and the Caribbean was laced with this Black Power movement. We had this overthrow all over the world. So Samusa, the Shah of Iran, and the violence in Trinidad, the Black Power movements. I think what it was, Sir Eric Gary overreacted in a way because he could not really understood where these guys were coming from. And to say that he introduced the violence, I think we're not being kind to history, because these guys too were not angels. They were not bent on just winning, going into an election and taking over a government by democratic means. But
was the Mongoose gang responsible for beating up and taking advantage of people under the orders of Eric Matthew Gary?
Let's take out the last part of your question. Not under orders. They were overzealous and they overreacted, and that was wrong.
Where were the orders coming from? Where was the orders coming from?
You didn't have to give these guys orders. If you oppose their leader, and because of the benefits that they got from the leader, because of what they saw prior to he coming on the scene, they took it on their own, and that was wrong.
Did Eric Gary know of the what was happening, what the Mongoose gang was doing?
In most cases, no.
He didn't know about it. Hold on. He did.
Junior.
Yeah. Go ahead, Livingston.
Junior. Yeah. Well, I think Mr. Baptiste.
Yes, my brother.
While the Mongoose gang was overzealous, and we agree to that, and a lot of things they did, probably it was not ordered, but there were no checks and balance. So even when complaints were filed, even in the presence of the legitimate police, they got away with a lot of stuff. And I think that is where the problem lies, is that I personally believe that a lot of them did what they felt they had to do. You oppose my leader is to me like a ground guard, a semi-guard, and I am going to take it on my own to ensure that I bust your head, or etc. And you see, so they was operating outside of the legal framework. Now the Mongoose gang only operated legally from 1973 to there about 74 after the Duffer Commission of Inquiry that called for the disbandment of the Mongoose gang. But the point we are making, I think you could accept that, is that there was no checks and balance.
But I'm not here to defend. Listen to me. I'm not here to defend the Mongoose gang. You know.
Okay, never. So cool. Let us move on.
Never again shall Grenadians behave against Grenadians the way we did with the PRA, the PRG, or the Mongoose gang, or whoever. We are Grenadians.
Right. We agree on that.
We must agree to disagree. Whoever did it, that was wrong.
For historical value, we need to know. I think history need to right that wrong. Our history need to understand the purpose of the Mongoose gang. We know that it was under it started under the agriculture, under the Ministry of Health.
The Ministry of Health,
for the eradication of mongoose. But where it started is not where it ended, right? And I guess further into the conversation. Yes, go ahead, Dennis.
It was not all the members of the Mongoose gang that was involved in any type of violence against people. You know, it was a selected few. I mean, you had these guys who were going out as enforcers, and as I said, that was totally wrong. And at the time, even though it was wrong, the leader at the time could have done very little because he had his back against the wall with a well-armed opposition. These guys too were hell-bent on taking over the country. And not only that, they did a lot of wrong things in the name of the Mongoose gang that the Mongoose gang never did. They burned houses, They kill people, animals, and the propaganda campaign, aided and abetted by the Eastern Bloc communist countries at the time, it went viral around the world as facts. But a lot of things that happened under the Mongoose Gang and was alluded to the Mongoose Gang was not necessarily so at all. So when we're talking about violence, we have to look at it on both sides, because the bishop and his gang, they were not choir boys either.
Okay.
Michael,
jump in here.
Yeah, let me just jump in here, because in the three of us here, I'm the only one that slept with the Mongoose Gang. When I say slept, not in a bad way. Okay, they put me there.
No, you're not that kind of guy.
Be careful, Dennis. Be careful.
I ain't wishy-washy. All right, but let me just say, I panicked that when after I got shot and spent about probably 6 months in the hospital, and they brought me back to the Riemann yard.
Got shot by who?
Huh?
By who? Who you got shot? Who shot you?
I know the guy who shot me. He's from Victoria.
No, under which you're talking about? Under Uncle Gary or under Bishop?
I know where Michael is going with it, right? Because Michael, you get into a point where we are going to get to, because you want to correlate that there was also abuses of power by the PRA.
We're going to get to that.
We're going to get to that. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah.
Michael, why are you stomping me like that?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about some things. So you know how it is. But yes, so they brought me, they told me I had to move to the infirmary because my hand was half paralyzed. It's still paralyzed, my left hand. I showed you already. I don't want to get into that right now because I want to complete the show. But if your viewers are looking, I could show you. You see the bullet took out half of my thumb and it came out by my pulse right below here. You could see the long line. Let me put it that way. You see that long line right here?
Yeah.
This is, and it cannot open, right? So my left hand is paralyzed. I've never been compensated. And in fact, I was shot point blank. I should have been dead because I was inside the door, peeping at those PRA through the peephole in the door. I had my like this, and the guy shot me.
Dennis, you're jumping ahead.
Yeah, I know that's where you're going, but
that what you're saying there is getting to Michael's point, where you were incarcerated and shot and abused by the PRA and folks in the PRA. But I want to. We're talking about the Mongoose Gang.
Right. Let me get back to the Mongoose Gang. So anyhow, they brought me to stay in the infirmary, which was filled with Mongoose Gang members. I'm talking about Kaiser, Pram, Tan. His name was Alston Hood. We had Heads. I know Willie, which is Bishop. He's a cousin of Maurice Bishop himself, and all of that. And what I'm saying to the Grenadian people, if the Mongoose Gang, if they were so vicious and deadly, why is it they were allowed to walk free and roam all outside the prison, all on the farms, you know what I'm saying, where they plant, I don't know, tomato and whatever it is, in and out, without being locked down? And you had people like Tillman Thomas, Winston White, Leslie Pear, young kids in the teens, locked up for 23 hours in a cell, while the Mongoose Gang free to roam and eat and drink, and they were never charged. There was one Mongoose Gang who was charged with murder or with scratching somebody or busting a head. No charges, never, none, zero. Not one member of the Mongoose Gang had any day in court for any offense during the Gary time. It turns out that it was a lot of propaganda against the Mongoose Gang. They protected me in there, all right? Some of the prisoners who were there for hanging and all of that, I didn't have bed on my face. I had a little afro, as you know. They used to wink eye at me because there was a whole lot of what you call homosexuality going on. Well, a lot of men in jail. They ain't going nowhere. Years in jail, lock up. So they see a young guy come in and his skin smooth and all of that. So it was very uncomfortable to me amongst them. And it was the very same Mongoose Gang that protected me. Okay. Nobody, right? So I don't buy into this viciousness like they came from hell, some devils. And hear what? The very same Mongoose Gang, when they had enough of these problems with Teddy Victor and all the others plotting to overthrow Gary, they wanted to take matters into their own hands. And guess who stopped them from going and wipe out Bishop and them? It's the same Gary. And I said I was in the same infirmary, it was a big open place, and everybody sleep. I had a cot, and next to me was Tower, the tall guy they made hold the marijuana plant in Tivoli, and after they jail him and say he walking around with marijuana, and they put him in prison. Well, right, my cot was here and Tower was there, and we had Pram right there and a whole bunch of them. I know all the Mongoose Gang members.
Right.
Who was at Richmond Hill. So those things are not true. They're big lies, right? Yes, they did boss a head or two, but not the kind of demand that people trying to make, because I could give you a lot of history on the Mongoose Gang and some of the things that they accuse them of. They knew nothing about it.
Okay, Livingston, for historical recollection, again, this is a history lesson. This is not about swaying. We're not trying to look for votes. We're not trying to prop up any political party. We're trying to give the facts to the people so they could live with a sense of knowledge in terms of history. There are people right now that's taking notes because they don't hear this history every day in their school. So I want us to be as clear as possible,
factual as fear,
and forget about the partisanship that exists now or existed then. It's not about politics. We ain't trying to rewrite history. We're trying to tell the facts. Was the Mongoose Gang involved in activities that was commissioned or sent out or ordered by the head of the GOLP at the time?
Well, we would not have that because one, I don't believe any instructions would be written. So you wouldn't get that actual as a fact. But in my opinion, some of the activities were ordered. When Gary called for the toughest, roughneck in tongue, he actually was sending out a signal. And I don't believe that he was totally unaware of some of the activities. I can understand where Dennis is coming from. He lived with them. I don't believe all the crimes that were accrued to them were actually committed by them. But I believe a lot of the crimes, a lot of the things, people actually got injured. People got a head boss. Yeah? Dennis, you have to remember people like Baldan and them and Noble and those guys and them from up our side. And they used to reign, there was a reign of terror when they walked the street and they would get a few persons beaten or send people home, etc. That is reality. That is fact. So, and they knew the target who they were terrorizing. In some instances, as I said, they actually went about, persons that were not even involved and also abusing some of those persons. But I believe that they were orders. So, Junior, you wouldn't have it as a concrete fact. They were orders that we need to give X amount that person, show them put some fear in them. And I know where Michael is going. And I'm saying we will come to that era where we see that same kind of behavior being committed 10 times fold more. We're going to come to that era. But yes, I believe that that Gary knew about some of the atrocities that were committed. And if one were to say fairly that he was not aware, Grenadians don't just take the lash and the complaint and the boss head like that. Yeah, when they slap up and knock up Alistair Hughes on the airport, it was in front of hundreds of persons, and he wrote about it. So all those things, and then I believe Gary knew of some of the activities, but I don't believe he knew and condoned all of the activities that they did.
Fair enough. Well said. All right. I want to move, Michael, unless you just want to say something brief there. I want to move on to the.
What I would say, I would agree with Livingston in a way that he did not order it, but he did not do enough to stop it.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Okay. All right. So,
Junior, let me make my last point on that. We are confusing and conflating two issues. You are talking about ordering, and you are talking about whether he knew or somebody gave him the information of what happened. And also, what most Grenadians don't know, the Mongoose Gang was the Mongoose Gang. There was one Mongoose Gang, right? Dalton Pope was not a member of the Mongoose Gang. Noble Philip from Monk Ridge, Mr. Baldan from John Baptiste in Tivoli was not a member of the Mongoose. Everybody around the country who probably, been very activist, defending Gary or beating somebody or doing everything. You call them a Mongoose gang. When I was down the hill, I spent 2 years and 8 months down there. Not even the Montrich guys would hold a conversation with the real Mongoose gang. They were not members of the Mongoose gang. That is just a fake, what you call fake news. Everybody jump on this Mongoose gang bandwagon, not knowing the reality of it. They did not used to talk to them. They had nothing in common. Not because you supported Gary and probably you felt a stone, you bust a head. So all of a sudden you are a Mongoose gang. No, the Mongoose gang was there.
Junior, I would agree with Dennis. So these were the secret police. So you had the Mongoose gang and the secret police. So
well, right. So there's a differentiation.
They were part of the secret. Yes, they were the secret police.
Okay, good. So let us get that clear.
Right.
That's
so let's move on. I want to talk about the day, that day, or the day leading up to the coup d'etat. I'm not going to use revolution no more because I think we came to the well, I mean, Livingston, you say you're still going to use revolution. So are we going to use revolution, or are we going to say it was not a revolution? Was it a revolution?
Well,
or was it
you know what is nice about that program? We can agree to disagree. So we can also from the on front disagree.
Okay.
We agree to disagree. I would say revolution.
You will say revolution. Michael, you're going to say it was a coup d'etat?
A coup d'etat.
Dennis, was it a coup d'etat or was it a revolution?
It was not a revolution because I lived it.
Okay, it was not a revolution. Okay, so it was a coup d'etat revolution / revolution. So the eve of that day, tell us what happened and what was the vibe of the people in Grenada and what happened there that led up to that coup d'etat, the 2 days before that day. Who wants to take that one?
Let Livingston go.
What you saying? 2 days before the coup d'etat?
Yeah, or just bring us into those day or 2 days and what happened on that specific day.
Right. So let me just say that well, let me just go instead of going. Gary had left the island, so he left the island, and that was not the first call. That was not the first attempt to have a revolution. So if you talk to persons that were intimately involved, there was a false alarm a month or two before that. So there was actually an attempt to have a revolution. Michael Baptiste made mention that the guys that were involved in the NGM had an arm you call the NLA, and the NLA was guys that were trained, that were sent to Guyana to train to conduct warfare. There were 50 or so rifles that were stolen from PBC because there was cadets around the time, and that was being used. So Gary forces were out in force looking for those weapons just months before, and so they were on that run. Around that same time, you had persons that were held in America for trying to ship arms to Grenada. So we're not fooling anybody. There were actually plans. So after the 76 election, some people were of the opinion that the election was stolen. I don't buy that. I believe the margin was too close to call. I believe the margin was too close. And I also felt that there was an actual plan. So when Gary left, it was an opening. As some people said, it was an opening. And the revolutionaries took that upon themselves to then call all the forces, led by persons like Sean Phillip, to attack the Trouble Barracks, and people like Kennedy Boudlal and others in Tivoli. Tivoli was really a hub, one of the hub for the armed struggle. So there was a lot of disenchantment by a lot of the youths, and so when the call was made, some persons just immediately gravitated to that to that morning. And if I were to describe that morning, I don't know if you want me to go through that, but that morning, you want me to stop or you want to have an
go ahead. I want to get an idea of that morning. If you just break it down for us. That morning.
Yeah, on that morning, what we find happening is that there was a sense of euphoria, this joy. Yeah? there was Grenadians felt that the energy was it was unlocked, that we felt that sense of patriotism more than probably any time after. And people wanted to be part of that process. People wanted to, to join and to be part of sorry, yeah, yeah, they wanted to be part of that process. So
Yeah.
the energy was running high. And for me as a young man, with all that was happening in Tivoli, with my brother Rasto being sent home 2 o'clock in the afternoon by police because he was sitting on the street, my brother Gravels getting shot in his arm. Kennedy Budlal had to run down, Ivan Bola, Kokonum, all those guys, and then Masai Cutlash being thrown at Kirby, just touching his neck, and all those things, and then Belma coming in the pasture and firing gun and dispatching everybody. We welcomed the revolution. And what we saw and what we read in that era was that this was probably an exciting time. It was filled with euphoria, and we wanted to be part of it. We saw Grenada on the heels of people like Patrice Lumumba, Nelson Mandela, and all the great heroes. We now encompass, the spirit of all the black struggles that was taking place. That is how we read into the revolution. But remember, there was a very positive force in the 76, 77, 78 that was more than the teaching. Although the leadership of the revolution was entrenched, decisive, united, there was a next force, a next message that was meeting us, the youth, the young people, and that was the influence of Rastafarianism and reggae music. So we were hearing all those things at them at the same time, taking place in Grenada, and we wanted to be part of that. But I'm telling you, what we heard from what the leaders were selling and what we heard from reggae music, we thought it was one and the same message. We heard about Africa Unite. So we were a force trying to unite the black people over the world. But what the revolution was selling was a different doctrine. What the revolution offered was an NGM, Marxism, Leninism. And what Marxism was saying was to fight about classism. What Marxism was saying that we could be part of the socialist bloc. What Marxism was saying, they have a phrase called dialectic materialism, meaning that your relationship, your enlightenment, your culture has more to do with your relationship towards the means of production, meaning that I have a greater affinity and camaraderie with the working people in England and Russia and Poland. That is what the revolution was saying. But what I heard in reggae music was that my affinity, my solidarity was with the black people in South Africa. So from day one, with all that we bought as the teaching, the doctrine of the revolution, we realized that there are two different messages. And so the revolution from day one was on a collusion path. So we were hearing one thing from reggae music that we embrace, Africa Unite by Bob Marley. Burning Spear, when Burning Spear said, we're trying to live up in the hills, where we're going to have our own industry and our own farm. So when the revolution said forward ever, backward never, I was hearing about the teaching of Marcus Garvey. When the revolution say some of the eat what you grow what you eat what you grow, I was hearing Burning Spear, who talking about the black man must have his own industry. So with some of those stuff on them, we were not aware, I was not aware. I was not aware that it was on a collision path that we were on. And that would show itself a little bit later. We will deal with that just now.
Right. Okay. Dennis, jump in right here. The day of.
Well, I want to say that my brother did a wonderful job. We grew up in the same place, pretty much did a lot together. Some of the things we did, I would not say on Facebook. We were open bowlers in the same team. You know, we still kill sheep and goat and eat when I go to Grenada. I stay at his house. But Livingston, I'm going to give you some blows right now. You just contradicted yourself. You just contradicted yourself. You said it was a revolution, and you just said it was not a revolution. Let me go back in time, and I'll tell you why I gravitated to the position that Michael Batiste espoused, right? Number one, it was a fake. The folks who fought, right, the revolution, primarily they were Jewel fighters. The faction led by Teddy Victor, people like Strand Phillip, Ralph Thompson, you know him as Ralphie, James Seary and all of that, you know, with the barrel of grease, you know, with guns in it and all of that from Mali Sotes and so forth. Those were the revolutionaries, Kennedy Boudlal, Evan Matthew brother, your brother, Gravels Nelson, Rodney Gravels Nelson, Skull Nayak, Ronnie Nayak, and a lot of them, you know them, I know them, we come from the same place, so I don't have to go into a whole list of names, right? Those were the revolutionaries. What you had on the other side was some opportunists. Maurice Bishop was not a revolutionary, neither Bernard Cord. Maurice Bishop was nowhere to be found on the morning of March 13th. Remember that. Neither Bernard Cord, he wasn't fighting any police station or attacking any place like how Kennedy Boudlal, your brother, and you and all of that, Jenga, your other brother in Canada, did. I was in Tivoli pasture just like you. All of us was in the same place. We know what happened. We were fooled. The people in Tivoli, they were taken advantage of. They were lied to. It was not a revolution. It was a power grab. It was a coup. And here what happened. You forget that the PRG did not exist before March 13th. And I just want you to consider that. You are my good friend. The PRG came into existence after March 13th, after the battle was won, and Kennedy Boudlal and all the other guys, Evan Matthew Bola, they went down to Montrouge and they handed over the gains, what they just accomplished, to Maurice Bishop. Remember that. Okay? There was no PRG in town. Nothing was called the PRG. The revolution was fought by the New Jewel movement, but more so by the section that was considered the Jewel, the old guards. We had Orel, which was under the auspices of Bernard Cord, and we had MAP, which was Maurice Bishop. So we had three of them put in one, like a three-headed serpent. Well, the only one that fought was the Jewel. And guess what happened? Your brother ended up in jail. Okay? Gravels. Your other brother ended up in jail on the 4th, Jenga, right? And your sister was beaten up and put in Grenville Police Station, all right? And, well, you didn't get in there. I got in there. I spent 2 years and 8 months. And I could tell you, from the jump, they had no intention of having a kind of common governance and share power with the guys from Tivoli, Teddy Victor, Anthony Billing Mitchell, and all the other guys from Vincent St. David's, James Seary from Sotes, and all of that. That was not the case. It was a power grab. And who was at the helm? Maurice Bishop and Bernard Cord. So they kick Kennedy Boudlal, Bob Boudlal, and all the others to the curb. They were used, and they turned around calling them marijuana plantocrat. It was not a revolution.
Right.
Let me pass it on to Michael.
Was it a power grab? Was it a coup d'etat? Was it a revolution? No, we're confusing.
Okay. Let me say coup d'etat. Forget power grab. I mean power grab from Gary.
Okay. Right? All right.
Power grab from Gary, but the PRG did not exist. There was nothing called the PRG. The guys who fought, they fought under the auspices. They considered themselves NJM.
Okay.
Right? And on that same day that the revolution succeeded, the NJM ceased to exist.
All right. So, Livingston, respond.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. What is a revolution? A revolution is a radical change in behavior. There were several things that were, it was new. It was new. Maybe the aspiration of some of the grassroots revolutionaries never materialized. That is so I can live with that. But to have a system whereby, to have a system where I get enough feedback.
Yeah.
To have a system where, am I the one who that?
Yeah, go ahead, Livingston. Go ahead.
Yeah, to have a system whereby you suspend the constitution for the first time. You have this disband of the existing military establishment. Your whole modus operandi changed and was different. Your outlook from a capitalist to a socialist, right? System. That by itself is revolution. Now, did they live up to the creed and the aspiration of the Grenadian people? I would say no. That does not mean it was not a revolution. Like all revolutions, they are usually the formation of two strands. So you have a radical and a moderate. Maybe the radical took over, but that does not mean it was not a revolution. So I want to stand on that Dennis still that I say it is a revolution, and I believe maybe a revolution again they took place within a revolution, or a kidnap took place within the revolution to change the original plan that was set up by the people. So that is my take on it.
Let's go over to Michael. Michael, give us some context from your point of view here on what it really was at the time, the days leading up to it. How did you see it?
Well, a group of young men, fresh from universities across the world, they came back to Grenada, and they came in with a foreign ideology, Marxism, communism, socialism, and they wanted to implement the ideology at all costs. I heard Brother Livingston said they pattern themselves after Marcus Garvey, and they listen to songs of Peter Tosh and all of these guys. But when you look at the people that was associated with the opposition,
Mr. Baptiste, I think you misquoted me.
Okay, I'm sorry if I do. They were part of the bourgeoisie system. Morris Bishop was a bourgeoisie leader. Eating what you grow and growing what you eat is a phrase that was associated with poor people because that is all they could have eaten. They were not the ones bringing in the Irish potato and the macaroni. It was Morris Bishop and his associates that was in that category. So after the overthrow, it was incumbent upon him and his gang to tell his followers that he must join the peasants, join the people on the bottom of the ladder who were utilizing the natural resources of the land. The stuff that they started, the agro-processing and they eat what you grow, that in itself is a fallacy. We had 4 soft drink companies in Grenada, local Grenadian companies at the time, Red Spot, Sky High, Solo, and the other one, Dennis.
Yeah, I can't remember it right now.
We had a lime factory. We had a soap factory.
From coconut.
We were making coconut oil for export. Our agriculture contribution to the GDP at the time was 69%. So we were well grounded. And in a very short time, they talk about agro-processing, but the groundwork had to be laid by the previous government for that to materialize.
Yeah.
Leading up to the revolution, to the overthrow.
Yes.
It was just a matter of time.
Hold on a second. I don't want to cut you. I have a call on the line. But caller, turn your background audio down, please, because your audio is coming through. Turn your background off, please. All right, caller, and stand by. We'll tell you when you could come in. All right, stand by. 1 second. Go ahead, Michael.
It was just a matter of time. The opposition had placed Grenada in a position for a civil war. They brought in arms and ammunition from outside. That is not a group of people that believe in the Westminster system of first past the post. They wanted to take power at all costs. So whether it was the Mongoose gang they used as an excuse, whether it was rigging of the elections, the die was already cast. They wanted power, and they wanted power at all costs. And if you go back again, and Brother Livingston Nelson would agree, in 1976, we had an election, free and fair election. The opposition was 6 seats, government 9. 79 was the overthrow. And I just want to insert here, you said that an overthrow is a radical change. I respectfully disagree with you in terms of what we're talking about. A revolution is the means whereby the masses revolt against the institution. That is what a revolution means and what we're talking about. The masses uprising against the institution. A coup d'etat is the means whereby an individual or a group of men armed overthrow a legitimate government. That is what that's the difference there. Okay? So I just want to set that straight.
Let's just take the call. We have a caller on the line right now. Caller, go right ahead with your comment or question.
I want to commend everyone, your panelists. I think they did a good job. I also want to say that there are some good comparison with the Gary era, the Bishop era, and what we have going on right now. So, revolution, what did it bring? Class structure was broken down. Your panelists, if they want, they can deny it. 2, more access to education. 3, I heard someone talking about the agro-industry. Well, there was a book written by the CIA that talked about this same agro-industry was one that did very well when most other countries around the same time in the Caribbean had a negative growth. Grenada had a positive growth from the agro-industry. Facts are facts. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Let me hasten to respond to that call about access to education. The standard of education under Eric Gary was the highest that we have seen in Grenada, even up to today. The Grenada United Labour Party government built the most schools in Grenada.
Correct.
It was the Grenada United Labour Party's government that was on the verge of introducing free secondary education to everyone. And it was the very said Bishop-led GNP-NNP that opposed that when they talk about Gary want to bring Kokotra children to sit in the classroom with them. So when we're talking about education, let's get it right. We had SGU. Morris Bishop and his gang said at the time that the only place students going to SGU could have practiced was maybe in Pigs and probably in Carriacou and PT Martinique. So we had SGU where Grenadian students could have learned at home. We didn't have to send them overseas. And the agreement with SGU at the time was that 30 Grenadian students would go yearly would go to that school free. And we had technical wing. Technical wing.
GBSS.
Yeah, technical wing allowed children, youths who were not academically inclined. It gave them an opportunity to have a technical education. In every school, we had woodwork and arts and craft center. Scores of young people got technical education from the technical wing in Grenada. Grenadian workers built Grenada. They built Lansapin. They built SGU. They built West Hall Point. There was no need for us to import any workers because we had a well-educated workforce. We made coffins in Grenada. We made school furniture in Grenada. So when you're talking about education, if you're talking about education, you have to talk about the Gary government. A child living primary school used to teach. There were over 9 principals in our primary schools that never went through a secondary school. But the curriculum in the primary school was so high under the GOLP that when you leave primary school, it was just as good as going to a secondary school. And those are facts.
So, right, Junior.
Yeah, go right ahead, Williamson.
Can I come in? So
Yeah.
I want to agree because I had a whole short list that I wanted to say. So I want to agree with Mr. Battis about the education, the sporting complex, the many playing fields and avenues that were open to persons. The revenue expand on some of those, yes. But during the Gary era, sorry, the level of secondary schools and sporting complexes and them was built is today still unsurpassed. I want to say something because I want to clear it, because when I was quoted by Michael, I was saying, and I just want to make sure that everybody here outside here listening understand what I was saying as it relates to. The NJM had a philosophy of Marxism-Leninism, but I'm saying what influenced the people most, what radicalized the youths, was not the philosophy of Marxism-Leninism, but was the teaching and preaching of Rastafarianism through reggae music. So when the revolution example was said, and I was saying that revolution was talking about class. And I'm saying no Grenadian feel no affinity or solidarity with the working class in Poland or in England or in America. But we felt an affinity and solidarity with the working class in South Africa, or the struggles of the African continent, or the liberation movement, or the independence movements within the region. We felt that. So that was our natural grouping. We had a foreign imposition that they tried to bring here that we didn't feel, we didn't understand, and we never accepted. Even today, African countries, there are no left-wing, serious left-wing country in Africa or in the Caribbean, because except Cuba, because we don't accept that the whole tenet of Marxism-Leninism was only your relationship towards material stuff. So we never accepted that. But I also wanted to go forward, say, when the revolution said fight against imperialism, we heard that, but we also heard Bob Marley that was preaching, we are the children of Africa. We are the children of the higher man. Africa unite. That is what we're hearing. When they say, again, forward ever, backward never, we hear get up, stand up, fight for your right. Or with Bonnie Wailer, when Bonnie Wailer sang, we're ready, when you're ready, we go tear down Babylon. That is what we were hearing. So the revolution was saying one thing, but we were hearing a different thing. Let those who labor hold the reign. And the program for low housing, or the low housing program, we were hearing Bonnie Wailer, when Bonnie Wailer sang, we go tear down Babylon. Let us struggle. We don't in the struggle too long. We don't in the struggle too long. Grow what you eat and eat what you grow. We were hearing on the agro-processing. We were hearing Burning Spear say, I think we should live up in the hills. Let us grow our plants. Let us have our own industry. In a nutshell, without going through everything, reggae music, not Marxism, is what radicalized the youth in Grenada and in the Caribbean. What is the difference in Grenada? We had a leadership that was very decisive, very focused, and very disciplined. The decisiveness was to have a revolution. The discipline was to ensure that they had cells throughout the island. Yeah? And to have focus group and people training with the intention to have a revolution. That was the difference that we had. So the many rallies, the many demonstrations were planned as a way to heighten that level of radicalization. So I just was making the point that people were clear that what we were hearing from the revolution and what we were hearing from reggae music sounded similar, but was different. And that is the point I actually wanted to make, in case I am mistaken.
Okay, Dennis, hold on. I'll come back to you, Michael. But Dennis, yeah, I hear you. I'll come back to you, Michael. Dennis, the radicalization, was it reggae music or was it the Marxist, Leninist, or the study? Because I've heard you said on the program before that prior to that we had members from the party that traveled abroad to learn about the Marxists. How did they become radicalized?
Yeah, well, as I said, the leadership of the No Jewel movement, all right, after the merger, the No Jewel movement, Bernard Cord, he traveled, he studied abroad. Unison Whiteman, he traveled, he studied abroad. Maurice Bishop, I think he studied in England, and he came back with his Marxist socialist ideology. It was not homegrown, right? So if you were to differentiate the leadership, most of them at the top, tier of the No Jewel movement, they all went abroad, they studied, they got indoctrinated, they came back. Some of them lay low. They kept most of the positions hidden for a while for political reasons, but they were Marxists, right? Okay, I love you, my brother, and but I'm still going to attack you. Okay, so having said that, you are right, Livingston. When you talk about the influence of reggae music, it was everywhere, but not only reggae music. We had a calypso in it, Brother Valentino. Stay Up Zimbabwe. Oh yeah, yeah. If you look at my video I did last night, right? That was the most played song throughout the revolution. It was a calypso. He's Grenadian born, right?
That was
Brother
after
Valentino,
this.
right? And that played night and day in Tivoli Junction, in Hermitage by Miss Kathleen Disco, all over the place. All right. So we got a lot from Bob Marley. We got a lot from Bonnie Wheeler. We got a lot from Peter Tosh, who was a little bit more radicalized in talking about liberation and legalization. You forget to mention the value or the importance of marijuana to the Rastafari movement. Peter Tosh's song about legalize it, or legalize it, and I will advertise it and all of that. The Rasta smoke weed. Maurice Bishop used to smoke weed too, and weed was very important to all those guys. Huh? Yeah, his family smoke. All of them smoke. In the buggy in Tivoli. I know, which is in Tivoli next to Ramdani shop. And of course, as I explained to you before, Junior, on the other side of the street was where his girlfriend, Jacqueline Kreff, Mr. Kreff, Alan Kreff, house was. So you cross the street, you're right in the buggy. The buggy was the grandmother of Livingston Nelson. So that is where they had the library with all the communist literature and all of that. Yes, but reggae music was very, very important, right? In the culture at the time, everybody gravitated to it, right? And also marijuana, which the guys smoke. All of them smoke. And if I should add, the breakup or the fissure that began with the Tivoli group with respect to the River Antoine issue, when they were accused by Maurice Bishop of being marijuana plantocrat, right? That is after he was secure. Yeah, marijuana mongoose, whatever, marijuana. But he knew they were smoking marijuana all along. He used to be there smoking too. You understand? But after the revolution and the Cubans were in sufficient force that he was not afraid of the Tivoli group. He backstabbed them, he reneged on it, and there was to be no River Antoine estate in terms of a cooperative and so forth. So the guys were not counter-revolutionaries. They were used and deceived, and the revolution had to fall for that.
Right. So we're there, but I want to also talk about during that period now. So we have the revolution, and guys, we're moving through it kind of meticulously. I hope you guys are following. We had the revolution, the overthrow or the coup d'etat at that particular time. We have a revolutionary government that was not really seen as a real government by the US and other forces, correct? What was that?
Yes. By the United States, yes.
Right, by the United States. What were the vibe of the people after now we have overthrow? We have Maurice Bishop there, who's a charismatic person that people seem to love. What was the vibe of the people, and were the general consensus that if we have a new leader, we're going forward with this new leader, and the backdrop of saying that what Michael was saying, that we had Maurice Eric Gary, he was a charismatic leader as well, but we have a different style of leadership. What was the leadership style in Maurice Bishop, and what was the people engagement, and how did people engage the new leadership? Whoever wants to take this one. Michael, you want to go for it?
Yes. Well, you see, when you have guns, it is not a true reflection of how people feel about you. I think the honeymoon period quickly vanished after the people recognized that the things that they were promised is far different from what they're experiencing. Because for one, we were deculturalized. We no longer could tell it as it is. We saw brother being put against father. We saw homes being divided. We saw thousands of Grenadians picked up and jailed without a charge. We saw irresponsible people holding guns and locking up people. And people start saying, no, that's not what we were told. That is not what we're going to accept. So several people that supported, in other words, oppositions of Eric Gary, the opposition who oppose Eric Gary, they themselves find themselves in difficulties with this new government, to the point where a lot of them were taken into custody. Some of the revolutionaries themselves were arrested and put in Richmond Hill without a charge for merely having a difference of opinion. So it did not take them too long to recognize that, hey, what we oppose is 100 times better than what we have with us now. So hence the people was at ease. You know, the Grenadian population, after every election, you would see thousands of people jumping in the streets and celebrating the victor. Whether they vote for you or they vote against you, celebration, everybody happy, they're celebrating. But it didn't take very long before the Grenadians became very disenchanted with the system, because there was massive oppression, there was abuse, there was the curtail of your civil liberties, and the people was afraid. They start asking for elections, and Bishop promised election. He promised election within a year, and the year came and no elections.
All right, let's stick a pin right there. Nelson, jump in right there at this point. Was it the disenchantment of the people so immediately after the coup d'etat that the people feel disgruntled?
Permit me, Junior, permit me 1 minute, probably 30 seconds, just to go back. Because I think in this program, we should really be fair in terms of looking at other aspects or other gains of the revolution, rather than just going and jump in what I would call the scenes of the revolution.
You're
so
fan again. You're fan.
Sorry.
Fan. Yeah.
Yes. So I am saying that so I am saying that, let us permit me just 30 seconds to go back and look at some of the programs and gains of the revolution, because we shouldn't just go and delve into the negativity. So the revolution had a system where they had what they call popular democratic arms. So you have the NYO, where you were expected to hear the views of the youth, National Youth Organization that was formed. You had the National Women Organization, again, to have on the national scene to take into consideration the views of women all over the island. And they had the CPE program, and the aim of the CPE was to eradicate illiteracy throughout Grenada. There was several scholarships to Cuba and the Eastern Blocs. They developed their own television and programs. They had books that they were trying to write to reflect the condition in Grenada. So I just wanted to say that they were part of the non-aligned movement in terms of expressing international solidarity with other countries that were in similar position. Mr. Baptiste might take me to arms with that. But they had the NIS. Of course, if we want to be doing justice, you could say the precursor was the Providence Fund, and the NIS.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Then you had the building of the international airport. The international airport, again, Mr. Baptiste, if we would want to say that the lands were already bought from W.E. Julian by Gary, and the
and a plane landed there.
The plane landed in True Blue during Expo. The plane landed. So, and they had maternity leave, etc., etc. So we must give the revolution some credence for the things that they try to do for us Grenadians, and some people seriously embrace it, and some people were not going to get that opportunity, and those opportunities, and they got it. So now, Junior, I can come to look.
Yes, go ahead.
At the scenes of the revolution. Can I proceed?
Proceed.
All right. So what I would call one of the first things that was promised was elections within 6 months. Mr. Batty said a year, but clearly it was within 6 months. But adult suffrage was suspended, meaning there was nobody that you could vote. The revolution fought tooth and nail against Gary. And in all the era, throughout the whole life they fought Gary, there was always a printed press, there was always rallies, there was always demonstration, be it that some people got beaten up, and there were radio programs. But during the revolution era, there was no freedom of thought on radio, on television, and on print. The Constitution was suspended. First, I said adult suffrage, so you couldn't vote. The Constitution was suspended. The people law took its place. So laws were made as they go, and it was not vetted. There was no major consultation as far as we're concerned. But there's something very interesting, and that is why I brought in the Rastafari and the effect of reggae music, Dennis. So by October the 15th, mind me, the revolution was in March. By the 15th of October 1979, 20 persons were arrested. And that includes people like Teddy Victor. Now remember, people like Teddy Victor, that was a major founder of Jew Will. He picked up arms in the revolution. Since then, he ceased to exist as far as I'm concerned. He was a non-player. Yeah, but Teddy Victor was arrested as a counter-revolutionary, one that was plotting to overthrow the government. We had Winston White, that was part of the UPP that formed the alliance that I mentioned earlier on. Winston White was he too was arrested, and a major figure. You had that in Ras Nanan. But the Rastafarians came out in drove during the revolution. And they were militias, they were in the army. They had stones, they had cutlass during March 13th. And you arrested Ras Nanan as being a plot to overthrow the revolution. And while I mentioned Ras Nanan, let me just say that a facility was developed in Hopeville, copied on the similar system that the Soviet had in Siberia. So we had almost like a concentration camp on the island. So irrespective of what Gary was doing, the revolution decided to multiply the torture, the incarceration, and the number of persons. Well, I will come to that again. Torture was rampant. So you had people like Kenneth Woodwell, Jacqueline Joseph, Brenda, Winston Simon Boko. This guy's scrotum was split. His scrotum, I'm trying to use correct phrase, the correct words there. His scrotum was split, and pepper and salt was placed on him, simply because they wanted him to confess, because some guys that was in the army was trying to escape Grenada, and they thought that he played a role in getting a boat for them, so they arrested him. Strand Philip was gunned down, execution style, after the June 19 bomb blast. Only later on to realize that Strand Philip had nothing to do with the bomb blast. Yeah? Dennis was shot in the prison while in prison.
Who gave the order? Who gave the orders?
Well,
Dennis,
you see, Dennis taking my job, you know. Dennis taking, not Dennis, Michael taking my job.
Can't wait. Junior, he still want to punch, he still want to crucify the revolution, he don't want to wait. So yeah, over 100 persons from the Tivoli and Montreat area were jailed. For matter of fact, a whole family. The mother named Annes, the Pascal family from Montreat were jailed. The son, all the children, all the girl, the boy children. A child was born and christened in prison. Yeah, coming from the Montreat area. The Grenadian voice was shut down. And you know, the persons that tried to write the papers, three of the main persons, Stillman Thomas, Leslie Pierre, Lightwell, those persons were in Richmond Hill Prison. 3,112 prisoners were detained for frivolous charges or for chump up charges. The revolution made Gary look like a saint. Yeah, and let me just say, just like how the Mongoose gang, are you hearing me loud and clear?
Yeah, we're hearing you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Just like how the Mongoose gang were rampantly on the street, meeting people and busting head and doing stuff. PRA, you see, they were doing that and then you went home. You wipe out the blood, you murder put spirits or whatsoever they had to do. You get a tubuto, you run, you bottom heart and you run. But during the revolution, all kind of Jukutu soldiers were able to arrest you. And you spent 2.5 years, 3 years. There was no recourse to a trial. Nobody you could complain to. And remember, during the Gary era, Bishop was a lawyer fighting for persons on Amnesty International. In Tivoli, we had a demonstration, and Dennis mentioned Tower. Let me just come back to Tivoli, because Tivoli took a lot of blows. And people like me and Dennis and Kennedy Billard, we hardly talk about Tivoli. But let me just say, there was demonstration. Tower came out from nowhere. He was not living in Tivoli. And Tower was given a marijuana tree and put on what we call a Janet truck. Tower spent more than 2 years in prison. All he wanted to do was to find out what was happening in Tivoli. My sister Rosalie Nelson, I ain't swearing that she never smoked marijuana, but I never see her smoke. I mean, and I knew most of the persons that smoke. She was imprisoned. She was put in a cell for selling, and the charge was that she was selling marijuana on a tray. There was no trial. There was no evidence. Nobody had to present those evidence. Yeah. So I am just saying the level of atrocities that were committed by persons. I myself, as a schoolboy, police came for me in school. When the police soldiers wanted to get mistaken. Well, I disappeared, so I made myself scared. They went on the western side. They met a young man they called Tukan. I remember as an athlete, I was an athlete during the time, and we had Eastern Games. That is just after the revolution, or 84, maybe 85. And I was participating in the event. And Sukan, his name is Gabriel Joseph, he demanded that I buy him a drink. And I said, I don't have money. What do you mean buy you a drink? I don't have any money. And he started using a series of obscenities to me. Why? He said, man, I took jail. They thought I was Gravel's brother. They thought he was Livingston Nelson. And he made jail over 2 years of mistaken identity. Nobody cleared his name in a year. Nobody cleared his name in 2 years. He was freed on the day that the Americans invaded Grenada. So those level of atrocities that we see happening, where we found that what happening to Gary multiplied 10 times fold, 15 times fold, because there was no checks and balance in the system, is something that we have to be very careful about going forward. I think I speak enough. I need others to come into the
a lot there said. And I have a feeling, before you go on, Dennis, I have a feeling that we will have to do a part 3. Because we're 2 hours into this, and there's still a lot era that we haven't even touched as yet. And I want to be able to give the audience the benefit of that historical value, and I don't want to speed up. I don't want to rush you guys. I don't want to rush the narrative, but we over time. But so Dennis, go right ahead from your point, because I know you are also a POW. Well, I don't know if it's a POW, but you was at that point in time. You were shot. You were in prison.
No,
Why were you?
He was a detainee.
He was a detainee. And after that, I'm going to pose the question that Michael asked: who gave the orders? But Dennis, go right ahead.
It, I think was very powerful, and I'm going to speak very, very fast because I know you don't have any time left. But I want to say that propaganda is very effective in cultivating and conditioning minds. Grenadians don't have a history of finding out facts for themselves. They listen to Radio Free Grenada, which was just a propaganda station, right? That's the reason why they shut down every alternative or every other news medium or media. And what they tell you, that is what you swallow, a bunch of lies. And they scapegoated Tivoli, but had there not been Tivoli, there would have been no revolution. I want to say something. I don't like to use the word revolution, but let's just say revolution. because most of the guys who fought, it was not a people a movement, maybe because of some struggle they demonstrated and all of that. No, Grenada was peaceful on March 10th, March 11th, March 12th, and all of a sudden on March 13th, the government was overthrown. It was the plantocracy that spearheaded and supported. Barrels of guns was coming down pretending it was grease from the United States. The guys who overthrew, a lot of them went and trained in the jungles of Guyana. At the time, Bonham was in power in Guyana and came back to agitate and overthrow Gary. Actually, they made many attempts on Gary's life to kill him so that they would put back Massa's son in power, a la Grenada. Okay, so let me just get that clear. A popular uprising by the people in the street, demonstrating and all of that, that did not happen. They went to bed happy on March 12th, on March 13th. And also, remember, there was nothing called the PRG. It had to fail. It was the NJM that overthrew Gary. And by the end of the day, when the dust settled, the government was called the PRG. Put that in your pipe and smoke it and ask yourself, why? One time they kicked out the whole old guards, the jewel guards, Teddy Victor, James Harry, Kennedy Budlal, Kenneth Bog Budlal, right? No position in government. It was a conspiracy. It was a power grab. So I would never call it a revolution because it did not benefit the masses. If you're concerned about educating the poor, why the hell are you going to have over 3,000 poor people, children locked up in Richmond Hill Prison? They used to have an old library. I would go there and get little books to read. At one time, they tell us, no, you're detainees. They shut the library down from us. When we get books from prisoners, they used to come and search our cells and take it 4 o'clock in the morning and put us outside on the concrete with machine guns all and so forth. Now, let me speed up and talk about when they shoot me. Yes, I heard a PRA say, we killing all those counters and them inside of there. I was on my bed. Kennedy Budlal was outside. When they got me, they brought me in. They picked me up because they say I was mannish. Kennedy Budlal was dating my sister. They had a daughter together. So he used to come home in our house. Everybody used to come home in my house. My mother was a dressmaker. She used to make wedding dress and sew clothes for carnival and harvest and all of that. My sister could sew too. So our house was like a hotel. Everybody's always in and out of our house, right? So I just returned from Trinidad. I went and steal sugarcane at River Antoine Estate. And I heard that they arrest Tivoli guys on the airport and Kennedy Budlal in jail and all of that. Myself and Dominic Paul of Spice Island Imaging. So I went up the road. We decided to cook some dumpling and back and egg. So I had to get 2 pounds of flour. And that's when the PRNM asked me to come and open the house. They want to go and search. I said, well, where are you going and search? I don't know, you guys. I wasn't in army. I wasn't militia. I said, what's your name? I said, you have a warrant? By the time I said that, about 6 PRA jumped out, crack up the AK-47 to kill me in front of Miss Alliance shop in Tivoli Junction. I'm like, well, shoot me. What I did? I said, you're the same guys that say Gary bad and Gary evil and Mongoose gang and all of that shit. Look at what, by the time I know that, man. So let me just fast forward. People still calling me to this day counter-revolutionary in plot to overthrow the government. I don't know what to do. So they took me and they put me in condemned cell where they hanging people. One day the prisoner, people didn't lock up properly. I see the big rope. I climb up. I see the trap door with the pin, a little pin where they pull and you come down. And when they reach down, they have a sink where they cut your ankle and after that. So where you say your last Hail Mary, just imagine a young kid. When I went in prison, I had to spell my name for them. They didn't even know my name. They didn't come to arrest me. They didn't even know who I was. And after that, they start giving me the ration pan with cockroach and flies in it. I'm like, I ain't eating that. I had no clue. My last our father. After that, you go and hang over there. That's what they did to me. Even the Mongoose gang was passing and peeping, walking up and down free outside. Then they transport me after that in what they call the Riemann Yard. And Kennedy Budlal Rasnanang, he got shot the same night with me. And a businessman from the United States called Antonio Langdon. I have lived long enough to forgive. I forgive. But they ain't fooling me and continue to fool people with that revolutionary hype. Long live the glorious revolution. I could tell you stuff that they did to us up there, who died in prison and what they did to detainees in Hookville and all of that. The torture, I could talk about that, but that'll take a long time. So I just want to hurry up and quickly, get that off my chest.
Yeah, and again, this would be a part 3. I know that we'll have a part 3 of this because there were some positive gains, but based on fact reports, a lot of people experience personal hardships in jail while locked up. Like Dennis just said, allow him to tell his story because he needs to say it. People need to understand. And I think more people, as they come out and share their experience, it's still very emotional for a lot of people. But the underlying question, and the last question I'm going to ask on this part 2 of this discussion is, and I'll go around the room, and then we'll cut off this part 2, is with all the atrocities, with all the people that was locked up, with the militia picking up people like Dennis and other people who they said was mannish or whatever, who gave the orders? I'll go with you first, Michael Batiste.
Well, obviously, the orders came from the top. Because when you suspend the Constitution and you proclaim the people's law, and it's changed from time to time based on who you arrest. Obviously, Maurice Bishop and the leadership of the government have to accept responsibility for everything that happened. So all blame must be placed on the footstep of Maurice Bishop.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Say nothing else. Say nothing else. Mr. Livingston Nelson, who gave the orders with all that happened there? Who gave the orders? Unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself, Livingston. Speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I say in twofold. I laugh because Mr. Batiste, whosoever is in the leadership, give the others. I would agree with you. And in both era,
yeah.
He got you there. He got you. He got you now.
But you see, but one of the things I believe in some instances the others came directly from what they would call the CC Central Committee. But I also believe that individual soldiers just, have personal gripe, hear something and believe that is their patriotic duty, would arrest you. And wheresoever they bring you, nobody asks any question. So I think to have a short answer, it is twofold, both from the CC, the Central Committee, and again, that could have been from Bernard Code, or it could have been from Morris, or it could have been the collective CC, or from the individuals that just randomly decide they hear rumors in the street that you batter the government and which one here you go.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna cut it right there, guys. Thank you guys for having this discussion with me today. Part 3 we will have, and we'll explore what did Maurice Bishop know about the lockups. What did he know about the incarcerations and what was being done in prison? What did he know? Did he know at all? You guys don't need to respond to that now. We'll have a part 3 where we explore those, and then we'll also explore what Grenadians call Thanksgiving Day. And is it really Thanksgiving? And what is it to be thankful about? October 25th, America came. People was in glee. People still trying to figure out why the hell are we celebrating. We'll talk about that in further details in the part 3. And in part 3, I want the audience, you guys that are watching, we're going to open up a Zoom, and I'll give everyone that wants to ask questions to be a part of this discussion, because this is not an insulated, this is not an exclusive conversation that those guys here are the only people that have facts or personal recollection of these. I think there are many, many people that have personal recollection that they could insert some of the history or the knowledge into this historical series that we're doing here, right here on Ridealong. So that's for part 3. make it a date. Keep it locked to Ride Along. We'll tell you when the part 3, most likely might be Thursday, but we'll tell you guys exactly the data is going to be. And I want you guys to participate. We're going to put you on the Zoom and we're going to get everybody comment and question. We're going to go around and just close it off. Livingston Nelson, I have that poem. I'm going to play it at the end, but just give a closing statement so we can wrap it up. You first, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, guys, I would want to thank you for the opportunity for expressing my views or opinion here. I hope that I've reached some persons. It was really nice chit-chatting, counteracting, no one then arguing with both Mr. Battis and Dennis. I think it was done in a very friendly and frank manner. So I'm really looking forward for us to, I mean, I don't know if I would be there, but I think Patri would have a lot of questions in terms of about the joint leadership and who is responsible for the execution of the vote. I think most people cannot wait to hear that part. So kudos, Junior, you're doing a very good job in helping to educate and helping to bring information to the general public. And I would say kudos and keep it up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Livingston Nelson. Mr. Michael Batiste, closing statement, sir.
Well, my brother, I want to thank you, the host, and of course, my brother Dennis and Livingston for the great contribution this evening. I think the discussion was very enlightening. We did not always agree, but then when we agree, when we disagree happily. And I think that's the way that we ought to go forward in discussing very emotional and contentious subject, the overthrow and of course the Bishop regime. I think you're doing a wonderful job in enlightening the public, and I'm looking forward to part 2.
Part 3.
Dennis, part 3. Dennis, I regret I couldn't join you last night, traffic and all of that, but any other time. And Livingston, I want you to get back in the ring, my brother. You were very good in the ring. I want you to get back. You have a contribution to make. You have a serious contribution to make, and the time is now. The country needs you, and I think you have to reconsider and place yourself in a position where you could pass along some of your experience and your knowledge to the Grenadian people. You know that. I'm not saying I'm not saying you have my support. I'm encouraged.
I thought you were publicly asking me to join you, no? I thought you were asking me to join you.
Well, maybe so. Maybe so. We'll talk about that privately. But I think you have a contribution to make, and I think you ought to come forward and re-enter the political arena. You're still a very young. Of course you will.
Yeah.
I think you would be a much better representative than what we have up there today. I'm sure.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dennis, go right ahead with your closing statement so we could wrap up part 2.
Thank you, fellow Grenadians and folks all around the world who have listened to Ride Along with Junior George, my good friend. It was a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. I hope I was able to impart some information to you that you would consider and adjust your views with respect to the Grenada 1979 overthrow. I hold fast to the belief that a revolution should be about improving the lives of the general population and not just empowering a few to rule over the masses or the many. All right. I will just end by trying to remind you, take note of it, that the nutmeg back pay was cut off by Maurice Bishop so that he can use our nutmeg to sell to Russia. The same back pay that many Grenadians used to depend on around Christmas time. My dad used to get a lot of money from it, thousands of dollars. We had both nutmeg and cocoa back pay that was suspended by Maurice Bishop, among many other things. So facts are facts. And I would like to debate a little bit more and give some more of my experiences up at Richmond Hill Prison and so forth during the revolution. So that is it. Until next time.
Yeah, and again, guys, we are gonna put out the information for our part 3 in this series, Education Revo, a deeper look. Thank you guys for watching. 2 whole hours, you guys sat there, you guys watch. It goes to show, right? that there's not enough of this information out there. We need a museum, guys, where our kids, our kids, our grandkids could go and learn about this. Because if we don't put this on record, right, in a few years, this information will be null and void. Nobody would know about it. Because let me tell you another thing. There are so many people that know so much more about the revolution, the coup d'etat, whatever you want to call it, but they don't hasten to speak about it. And that is sad. Because just like how we lost the Patwatong, I'm fearful that we would someday lose that very valuable history. There are very few history books that detail these things. That's why when you have Dennis, you have Michael, you have Livingston, you know, all of them have different views because they experience different things. We need to compile the true history. We can't rewrite the history. We need to compile the true history of what happened, honestly. And I know a lot of people in part 3 would ask, so where's Bishop Body? And one person that we're really gonna try hard to get on this program. In fact, I speak to him very often on social media. Bernard Cord. I would say that we're friends on Facebook, and I'll make an appeal because I know he watches the show all the time. Comrade, I'm appealing to you, if this is the right time, if you feel so, that is the right time to chat with us. We'll be very happy to get your historical recollection. You'll be doing a lot of good to the population, the younger population, folks like Abdullah. Mr. Bernard, we spoke, and you had expressed to me that you in some way, some form, some shape, that you'll be willing to conversate on your involvement, and what part you played, just to put things in historical perspective. That's what we want. That's what we want. We want to put this thing in historical perspective. So my son, I could say, look at this. This is what happened. This is our history. We have to understand our history to appreciate our future. Everything that happens ahead of us, if we don't learn from the history, we will make the same mistakes over and over again. So I'm calling on everyone that have information, please. It's your obligational duty to come forward and speak. And let's put this historic part of our past on the books. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for supporting. Thanks for being a part of our program. I want to impart on you guys as well. That is on a side note. Ridealong is able to facilitate programs like this, and Ridealong is able to function because of your support. Yeah, we are able to function because of your support. We are group funded, crowd funded. So we urge you guys to become a supporter of Ridealong. Become a supporter. Click that button right now and become a supporter. It costs you $4.99, less than the cost of coffee per month. Yeah, and by doing so, you're not only supporting this program by coming on air every single day, but you also help us help others that needs assistance. And we do this every single day. So think about being a supporter of Ridealong. Join up, click the button, and become a supporter. You get a badge, and the badge, you could show off your badge. You are a supporter, bona fide supporter. And with your support, we're able to do things like we're doing this $1,000 shopping spree. And because of supporters who donate to the program, we're able to give 2 families $500 to go on a shopping spree in a designated supermarket. Because of your support, we're able to do things like that. All right? So think about it, become a supporter. And in reference to the shopping spree, guys, if you know anybody that may need assistance in this rough COVID times, please inbox us so we could put their name on the or not on the ballot, put their name in our caddy so they could be potentially picked to become one of our selected, I should say, for someone to take advantage of our $500 shopping spree. All right. So, guys, contact Ridealong if you have someone that you wanna nominate, and we'll definitely put them on our list. And we thank you guys for being a supporter. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for sharing. Thank you guys for being there for us. And we'll be there for you when you need us. We're always here for you. All right. Peace out, guys. Also, I gotta big up some of our sponsors, people who put their money where their mouth is to assist us. Megaforce Promotion, and they have in the $20,000, $20,000 virtual bingo. Yeah, Waggy T virtual bingo, $20,000 US. That's on Sunday, November 1st. Tickets only $20. Check out GoToFed for more information on this $20,000 virtual bingo. Get your ticket, $20. $20,000. Wow, that's a great Christmas, huh? Get your ticket at GoToFet. Yeah, get your ticket at GoToFet. Is the Megaforce Waggy T virtual bingo, and that's US $20. $20,000.
Grenada is such a beautiful country, where come put so much black makers of history.
Also,
Man, I sure that many
also,
people will agree.
we got to tell you about the hand sanitizer, 70% alcohol by volume, bottled by the
standard of skills and talent we have.
by Clark Scott, the Grenada Distillers Limited. 70% alcohol by volume. It's a small, nice, neat package. Alcohol, hand sanitizer. You could carry it with you. Very handy. And you know what's happening? COVID, this is perfect. You're riding on the bus, sanitize your hands. It's available in Grenada right now. We're going to put information on the Ridealong page where this is available right now. It's the hand sanitizer. Get it right now.
That my country would do for me. I am proud. I love my Grenada.
A message by the Grenada Distillers Limited.
You want a hand sanitizer to do 3 things: kill germs, be gentle, and to go where you go. You can get all of that in our hand sanitizer. Hard on germs, gentle on hands, affordable. Remember, hand sanitizers contain alcohol. Keep away from heat and flames and avoid contact with eyes. Available at retailers island-wide.
Hey, I got some good news for you. Looking for a passionate immigration lawyer with experience that spans over 2 decades? Someone trusted that served immigrant families just like yours? Well, look no more. Now you can benefit from her personal and professional experience. Diane Winter Funde. Schedule a consultation now and get assistance with your immigration journey. Specialize in adjustment of status, B1 business visa, B2 visitor's visa, consular processing, deportation defense, naturalization, and more. Give us a call today at 813-815-3529. That's 813-815-3529 or online at winterimmigration.com. Attorney Diane Winter Funde. Law done differently.
The wind stood still, the bell never sung. Screeching tires, slamming doors, an explosion piercing the stillness. Naked bodies shook waving as flags. Hard black muddy feet, scratching, pounding, crushing the earth. Mad with rage, direction unknown but running. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution. Budlal, Cadwell, mucho nada. Armed with guns, dirty and shot. Rusty, greasy, sticking bullets, but armed. Cutlass, stones and sticks as they rolled too. Eyes bloodshot, filled with fear. Dirty and uncertain, but determined. to chase, to eliminate. But bravery, courage, the old manhood in quest. No blood must flow, but bullets must fire. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution. Young angry men chased the despot. The temper boiling, revenge is sweet. So kill, beat, cuss the police, the Algerians. Retrench, disobey, lay off the teacher. Imprison, hang, behead the Mongols gang. We the rebels would do the job. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution. But the leaders call. Way from here, but they call. Control, retain, maintain discipline. Embrace the community. Do not execute the enemy. It's a call to order. Be vigilant. So anger suppress. No sacrifice made. The old bureaucrats trod uneasily. Lumpins, thieves, good-natured citizens led by true revolutionaries. Private became public. New guards guarded their property. One man got shot. Bullets went off accidentally. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution. Cease your looting. It's a socialist order. Work for the unemployed. Home for the homeless. Land for the landless. Let those who labor hold the rein. Forward ever. Backward never. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution. The meeting was held. The trap was laid. The timing was right. Like a festering wound. Like a seething volcano. Our very hope, our aspiration, our belief and dignity trembled. We lost the battle with the demagogues. And with the greed and lust, with the hate and scorn, and boom, they executed the revolutionary man. And that was the end of March 13th, 1979. Revolution.